A big talking point surrounding Oregon's 2025 recruiting class was that elite DB haul. But could they run it back and do it all over again at that same position when we get to signing day in 2026? The Ducks played 10 of their 12 regular season games on network television last year. Will the networks love the green and yellow in 2025? I'm going to make my Oregon TV predictions for the upcoming season, as well as a conversation with Willamette High School head coach and former Duck Josh Line. This and a whole lot more coming up on a stacked edition of That Show Out West.
This place has everything. In fact, the grass is damn green in Eugene.
That performance deserves a holy wallawa.
It's a feeling you cannot explain.
This place is louder than any other venue in the Big Ten.
This program is staged to compete and to win championships.
Welcome to the Big Ten, Oregon.
Welcome to That Show Out West for That Team Out West. I'm Ted LeBrew. Not only is this a Wednesday edition of TSOW, this is a birthday edition of TSOW for yours truly. That's right. 34 years ago today, I came into this world on a hot, muggy summer day, early summer day up in northern Wisconsin. And I can't imagine anything else I would rather be doing than talking Duck football with all of you on my birthday. But it's not just Duck football. Rinse and repeat, because we are talking about another elite weekend in Oregon Duck athletics. Man, this was a weekend for the ages. Not only in the Pacific Northwest at home base in Eugene, but also across the country in other parts of Big Ten country. I think when we talk about this great weekend that Ducks athletics had this past weekend, you got to talk about Tracktown USA. You got to talk about track and field. You got to talk about the Big Ten outdoor championships being at Hayward Field. Take it from somebody who worked the Big Ten outdoor track and field championships a couple of years ago in Minneapolis. And then I kind of look at what Hayward Field is. That is an ultimate showcase of track and field out there. Certainly something that we did not have in Minneapolis when I covered that event. It is certainly much bigger, certainly much better out there in the Pacific Northwest. And what a showcase it was for the great facility that was Hayward Fielded out there. Not only the showcase of the facility, but the showcase of the team, men's outdoor track and field, taking home the Big Ten championship. And there's a reason it's called Tracktown USA. Oregon taking home 3 of the 4 possible track and field championships in the Big Ten this season. They swept the indoors, and then, of course, as I just said, the men's outdoor team won the Big Ten title as well. Then we talk about the Diamond. Now, baseball needed a little bit of help. They needed a UCLA loss, and they needed to go on the road to the Big Ten leading Iowa Hawkeyes and win not 1, not 2, but 3 consecutive games. You know what happened? Exactly that. The 8th Big Ten championship comes home because of baseball's great finish to this regular season. 8 is certainly great here in Eugene, Oregon. You know, all of that was really good. All of that was great. But I think what brought it home and what made the weekend elite was the very end of the weekend on Sunday. And it was the absolute end of the weekend here in the Central Time Zone. Because at the strike of midnight, I think maybe one of the best moments in Oregon athletics happened during this year. Certainly, at least, softball. All right, the NCAA regionals, they're at the Jane in Eugene. They lost to Stanford to kick things off, and then Stanford did not lose the rest of the way. So in a double elimination format, Oregon softball needed to beat the Cardinal not once, but twice in the same day. Game 1, the bats were hot. A 15-5 win over Stanford in Game 2 didn't exactly start the best way. How about a grand slam and a 3-run home run from the same batter in the Cardinal lineup? Oregon got down 7-3, but they just kept on chopping. They kept on chipping away and chipping away. Eventually, this game was tied 7-7 in the bottom of the 7th. And this is kind of where my storytelling comes to an end. How about we let friend of the show, Ryan Winter, a Sport Chat 503, who was sitting in the second row behind home plate, tell the rest of the story and what happened on one swing of the bat to propel Oregon to the Super Regionals. A walk-off at the Gene. Are you kidding me? You love the passion from Ryan and a lot of the other fans in attendance. You know, I'm 2 time zones away, but man, I can just tell how tight-knit this community is. You see the football players running onto the field. They were there supporting this softball team over there. It's a very tight-knit Duck athletic community, and I think when you've had the success that they have, it just makes it that much more fun. Let's begin the football portion of this football show. Man, what does it say about Oregon athletics that we're almost 10 minutes into this thing and now we're just starting to talk about football here on today's show? But let's begin on the Oregon recruiting trail. Let's get in our stagecoaches. Let's get in our covered wagon. Sometimes that road can be a little bit bumpy, but it's been very smooth at the end here as of late, these last couple of years, when you get towards signing day. And when you look back to signing day last season in 2025, the big name on the marquee, the big headliner, of course, was DeCorian Moore, the wide receiver out of Duncanville, Texas. Of course, that flipped on July 4th of last year and ended up signing with the Ducks. But when you look, I think, a little bit deeper to that maybe second group of names in the marquee and really the position group, the headliner of this class that I think really vaulted it to that top 5 ranking that it ended up with, was this defensive back group. They took not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 players that were top 80 overall in the country that were all a part of the secondary. 3 corners and 1 safety last year. Of course, it was led by Naeem Offord, the signing day flip out of Alabama, the top player out of the state of Alabama. He was the number 12 player overall according to the industry. You have Trey McNutt, safety out of the state of Ohio, the number 26 overall player. Brandon Finney coming out of DMV right there at number 58. Dorian Brew at number 79. Like, you look at that class from last season and you think like, oh man, this is a haul. This is the building block for the future of what Oregon's secondary is truly going to be. These are all really good to great players, elite level players that can play at least a couple of years for the Oregon Ducks in this rotation consistently. And then you look forward to 2026 and you'd be like, well, yeah, I don't think we're going to take as many players in the secondary as we did last year. That's maybe the initial thought. That's maybe the initial conversation. But au contraire, because the no-fly zone is being built. And when you look now at 2026 in this class, because things are starting to shape up a little bit, they're starting to get a little bit more clear. You know who some of the leaders are when you get into this official visit season. Official visits are being scheduled. Commitment dates are being set. And I don't need to talk about, again, how Dan is focused on this season, on really dominating in the summer and getting these commitments. But Oregon is in play for 5 defensive backs in the 2026 class that are all in the top 50 in the country overall, according to the industry. So if you're expecting this thing to maybe slow down a little bit, you may be severely disappointed when you talk about secondary recruiting, because I think it's starting to be established that Oregon is a place that people can look to, both high school, we're going to talk obviously more about high school recruiting than this segment, but also transfers can look to and say, that's where I can turn into an NFL draft pick in the defensive backfield. No doubt. Tosh Lapoy, Dan Lanning, Rashad Wadood, Chris Hampton, they are really starting to build something and starting to build a significant future. We're going to talk about what this future secondary might look like a little bit later on, certainly in the secondary. But when you look at these guys in 2026, I feel confident. There's 5, and I'm going to kind of break these guys down, but I feel really good about Oregon ending up maybe with 3. I feel really good about 2, but I think there's a good possibility that the Ducks could have 3 of these guys sign on the dotted line when all is said and done. And 7 blue chip secondary players in back-to-back years, yeah, that will establish yourself as one of the top secondary destinations in all of college football. Look, I've talked about Brandon Arrington at least a couple of times on this show, and for good reason. In last week's show, he was one of my top 5 priority commitments going forward for the Oregon Ducks right now. Like 6'2.5", 180 pounds. I posted I quote tweeted one of Brandon's tweets on Twitter with him and his wingspan sprawled out. I'm like, is that a corner or is that a freaking pterodactyl? Because when you combine his height, when you combine his length and speed, if you've been watching TSOW, you've seen a Chris Hampton soundbite where he talks about the traits, height, length, speed, as those types of traits that Oregon is looking to in terms of talent acquisition to bring in the secondary. But Brandon is, I've talked about him before. I'm not going to talk about him as much. I love the guy. I want him to be an Oregon Duck so bad. And I think there's a lot of people out there in the Duck fan base that want him to be a Duck really bad. He's number 9 player in the country, according to the On3 industry right now. The good thing about the Ducks right now, they hold the last visit for Brandon on June 20th before his set July 5th commitment date. I love having the last visit. I love when he's able to kind of go out and see some of these other schools, and then he's going to have all of that in the back of his mind, and he's comparing it to what Oregon does, and we know Oregon can certainly pull out all the stops when it comes to these official visits. And then when you go into the bunker with your family, what's the last thing you're thinking about? You're thinking about the last school that you visited. What's most recent? And in this case with Brandon, that's going to be the University of Oregon right now. Texas A&M was really setting the pace with his recruitment last year, but Oregon's gotten into this thing. Of course, the track and field connection. He's a stud in the 100-meter, 200-meter, a state championship type of guy in the state of California. USC is going to be in there. The weird thing about USC, they've taken a lot of really good corners in this class, like R.J. Sermons and Albert Hill as just a couple of names they've taken. They're going to get to a point, I think, pretty soon where if they take more of these high-level defensive backs, they could see some decommitments on the back end. We already saw it with Xavier Griffin out there at linebacker for them. They're taking a little bit of a different strategy with their recruiting right now. But let's move on to some of these other players in this 26 class that I have not talked about yet, and I think right now in this segment is the perfect opportunity to talk about him. Let's talk about Jet Washington. Coming out of one of the premier high schools in the West, that's Bishop Gorman down there in Las Vegas. They produce really good players on a year-by-year basis. When you look at Jet, he's the number 26 overall player according to the industry, 6'4.5", 200 pounds. Steve Wiltfong considers Oregon as one of the favorites right now. When I look at Jet, there's maybe a reason why Jet is his name. He's got fantastic straight line speed, fantastic straight line acceleration, fantastic straight line anticipation. It is elite. You put on his film from Bishop Gorman and you jump out of your seat a little bit. It's like that guy is shot out of a freaking cannon. He's a 747. He's an airliner when getting from point A to point B. That's what I really love right now about Jet. And he plays the ball like a wide receiver right now. So he's got those types of ball skills that you look for from that safety position where in the deep third, you can go up and you can make a play in a jump ball situation, even against a bigger type of wide receiver. Like we know Kingston Lopa on this year's team, he's kind of that 6'4", that 6'5" range. There's a couple of safeties right here on this list that have the type of height that I think we're going to see from Kingston Lopa and Jet Washington. Like when I look at all 5 of these guys, Jet is certainly towards the top of the list of guys that I feel very confident that Oregon is going to be able to close the deal on. Devon Benjamin, like if Jet is at the top of that list, I think Devon is really close, coming out of Thousand Oaks in California. Oregon is considered the leader here. He's yet to schedule some official visits. Steve Wiltfong has already RPM predicted him to land at Oregon. Now, he's a smaller stature when you take a look at all these guys. 5'11", 165. A good amount of his highlight tape is actually on offense, where he's kind of working out of the slot on offense. He's very quick movements, very twitchy. And when I kind of look at what his tape looks on offense, and I kind of like sometimes when defensive backs, high-level defensive backs in high school also play wide receiver. They also learn that side of the ball, so maybe they can anticipate some things in some of these route trees and these route combinations. But when I look at Devon, and I look at his stature, and I look at, maybe some of these other guys that are a little bit longer, that are a little bit taller, that are maybe a little bit faster. The recovery speed maybe is a little bit better right now. I look at Devon, and I'm like, maybe he's a guy that could fit in at the star position. Maybe he's someone post Dalen Austin that could really be in that slot corner, in that nickel type of spot in Oregon's defense. Because I think he's got that twitchy quickness to be able to keep up with the twitchy quickness from slot receivers on the offensive side of the football as well. So he's one guy I think that brings a little bit of a different skill set, a little bit of a different, smaller size and stature compared to some of these other guys that I'm going to be talking about. Now, those are the guys that I feel really good about. Now, these are guys that I think are going to be a little bit more of a battle, maybe a little bit more of a reach. Let's talk about Jaira Edwards coming out of DMV. 6'1.5", 205 pounds. Now, he's in that DMV area. He's in that Baltimore area. We've seen Oregon start to form a little bit of a pipeline over to that area. Ife Obadegwu came out of that area. Brandon Finney came out of that area. Not a defensive back, but they're trying to get Emmanuel Iheanacho at offensive tackle out of that area as well. Jaira has an official visit scheduled for June 20th. It's the final visit of 6 visits. So Jaira and Brandon Arrington both have a June 20th visit, and it's both the final visit in their list of visits right now. So that's extremely encouraging, I think, for both of those guys right now. He's a 5-star on 24/7 and Rivals. He's an extremely physical player. Like, when I kind of look at all of the different skill sets of these 5 defensive backs right now, Jaira is certainly the player that on film he really emphasizes on the highlights that are put out on these recruiting services, that it really shows, it's trying to show coaches and teams like, hey, I can be physical, I can play near the line of scrimmage, I can be that type of player, almost like a safety, like linebacker type of crossover. I mean, at 205, he would need to put on a lot more weight, I think, to be a linebacker, but he's got that type of skill set. That's more of that hard-hitting, play-the-run type of skill set over there. He can certainly play the pass really well. He's a 5-star safety, certainly for a reason. The last one is maybe a little bit of the late riser and the late bloomer within this class, and that's Joey O'Brien, sitting at number 41 overall right now, 6'4", 180 pounds. He really had a breakout performance at the OT7 7-on-7 fairly recently. He's got an official visit locked into Oregon for June 6th. Now, he's going to be compared a lot in this class to Jet Washington, right? They're both, 6'4", 6'5", those taller athletic safeties certainly back there. He's probably not as fast as Jet. I talked about that speed, that anticipation, getting from point A to point B, reading the ball, get into that spot. But he's got just as good as ball skills, I think. He plays wide receiver. There's a good amount on his highlight tape where he's playing wide receiver in the state of Pennsylvania. And I've talked about why I kind of like that as well. Like, he's got that ability to go up and play the ball certainly really well. Notre Dame and Penn State, I think, are going to be very tough to fend off right now for Joey OB, but it will certainly be very interesting to see how that plays out. It is very clear that the Ducks are building a no-fly zone in the secondary, and this has become a point of significant emphasis, and you're really seeing what I think the ideal image is for a Dan Lanning, Tosh Lupoi type of defense, where they have a stout, big, great pass rushing defensive line that can get after the quarterback. And then you have secondaries that can also help out that pass rush to be able to get home, where they can lock guys down. They're long, they're tall, they're athletic. They've got great recovery speed. Like, I think that's the type of formula that Tosh and Dan are trying to put together to really form at Oregon. And I love absolutely all of it. Now, let's talk about the future here for a minute and this secondary. Like, when I looked at what this thing could be in 2026, what this thing could be in 2027, it is utter madness. It is ridiculousness. Remember that show on MTV? Like, 2025 in so many different ways is building the bridge to like 2026 and beyond. There's a lot of youth that's been talked about ad nauseum. There's a lot of youth back there in that secondary. Like, a potential 2026 secondary could see a second-year starter, redshirt sophomore edition of Ifeoma Degwu. You could see a second-year starter of Dalen Austin, also a redshirt sophomore at that point in time. You could see a second-year starter of Kingston Lopa. I think he'd be a true junior at that point in time. And then Trey McNutt and Naeem Offer, their second year in the program, maybe first-year starters. Like, that is a really good secondary. You move on to 2027, close your eyes and try to dream. Did not think I'd be singing during this segment, but you could possibly have a second-year starter in Naeem Offord. You could have a second-year starter in Trey McNutt. You could have a first-year starter, second year in the program, redshirt freshman or sophomore in Brandon Arrington. Same with Jet Washington as well. And you still got Dorian Brew out there who'd be a junior. You still got Brandon Finney out there who'd be a junior. Nowhere in here, as I mentioned, Aaron Flowers, and I think he could certainly fill in to maybe one of these roles as well. Like, the talent is so insanely deep at secondary compared to any other position on the field. It's provides a very optimistic future. And when you look at how the Ducks have bowed out these past two seasons, this was a necessity, where if they want to get to that level, they want to be able to go on a playoff run and win a national championship. It's been proven that they check a lot of other boxes, but they needed to get better at the secondary. Yeah, I think 2025 and what could be in this 2026 recruiting class, yeah, I think they're getting better in the secondary. You know, not only in this show, but also in other shows, we've talked a lot of recruiting battles and recruitments and uncommitted kids. And although we will continue to talk about that, we got to talk about some kids that are bought in, the kids that are extremely committed to Oregon Duck football. And when I say extremely committed, I'm talking about moving from their home states, Arizona and Utah, and playing high school football in the shadows of Autzen Stadium. That being Viliami Moala and Tony Cumberland, a couple of defensive linemen that have transferred over the past 2 years to local Willamette High School there in Eugene. Now, what exactly is the impact having those players playing so close to their future home? Well, we got one guy coming in that might know a thing or two about the relationship and the development of those two kids on their road to Eugene. That is the head coach of Willamette High School, the Wolverines, now entering his second year, and a former Duck himself. He is Josh Line, and he joins us now here on That Show Out West. Josh, it's great to have you on and talk about this. Now, we've seen across the country kids that are playing in a different state and they transfer very close to where they're about to play their college ball or where they are committed to play college football. Of course, you're entering your second season. Ami Malawa, Tony Cumberland are a couple of those guys that you know very, very well. What excites you the most about the opportunity to get Ami and Tony ready for the next level as they'll eventually make their way to play in Autzen Stadium?
Well, when we got the opportunity and when this was all, when we were approached about potentially having them join our program, obviously any coach out there wants to coach the best players that they can get their hands on. But, from a development standpoint, I think my staff is uniquely qualified to help kids in this situation. And then being close to the university and having some access to the program, from a relationship standpoint has been beneficial, not just for us to help the kids, but for the kids themselves. And so, extremely excited to get the opportunity to work with these guys. And it's not just a football development, thing. I mean, I'm sure most fans can understand that these are still high school kids. They've got high school problems and they're still developing in a lot of different ways. I would say probably football is the least of their development that they need to work on, although it is very important and we certainly work on that. But making sure that they're progressing academically, making sure that they're prepared for what's next. And our ultimate goal and what we focus on the most when we talk as a staff about developing these two individuals in particular is to make sure that they can compete when they get there, because we know how competitive that environment can be. You mentioned I played, but I can tell you right now, I wouldn't get 1 minute of playing time on this current Oregon team. The talent level is much higher than when I played, and we're not lost on that at all. And so we want to make sure these guys are ready to go when the time comes.
Well, let's talk. You mentioned relationships, and that's something that's been brought up when people talk about Dan Lanning and the staff and recruiting. Is he maybe forms better relationships than anybody? What is kind of your communication? What is your relationship like with the staff as it relates to Ami and Tony and their development and their path to Oregon? And what's kind of the communication like between those two players?
Well, I would like to make a comment about Dan Lanning. I would say, we've had some great coaches in between, the Mike Bellatti's out there, who I played for and I love dearly and still love very much, and had a huge impact on my life. But from that time, when Oregon started to have success in the Chip Kelly era, of all of those coaches, and they've all done a great job in their own way, Dan Lanning has been the most inviting to, especially alumni. He's definitely made it a priority, and I felt that from the time he was hired to now. And that, I think, as we've embarked on this, trying to help these young men that have chose to come and play in the area and make the commitment to come to Eugene and play for a local high school, knowing that they're going to go on and play at the University of Oregon, establish their families here. That relationship has continued. I mean, they're very accessible. I mean, if we have any issues, probably the biggest benefit they are to us is I've learned a ton about the academic standards and how to prepare both of these guys for, not just to enroll at Oregon, but to potentially enroll early, which is something that a lot of these high-profile kids are wanting to do. Not long ago, I coached a young man named Tatum Tuioti, and he was in a similar situation. I mean, we ended the season, and he was already at Autzen practicing, and that was kind of my first, real experience with that. I had never really gone through that process before, and it was really foreign to me. I remember going to a spring practice and there's my player.
Let's talk about each one of these guys individually and maybe what their future holds. Ami recently showed out at a camp in Salt Lake City, an Under Armour camp, where he got an Under Armour All-American Bowl roster spot. Some people thought he should have been defensive MVP at that point as well. He's kind of like in that consensus 3-star category. I think maybe when all is said and done, maybe after this season, he's going to maybe take that leap into a 4-star type of category at the defensive tackle position. But now you have not coached him yet, right? He's just transferring over for this season. So based on kind of the interactions and the conversations that you've had from him and maybe some of the work that he's putting in right now, what excites you the most about getting him on your squad for this year and developing for him for this year so he's ready to go when he hits the ground running when he eventually gets under Dan Lanning?
Well, we've worked with Ami. We're in our off-season program, and so we do a weight training program in the morning, and he's incredibly strong for a young man his age. The thing that really jumps out is his power, and he's got that in spades. He performs at a high level in the weight room. There's no doubt about it. And the thing that really stands out to me when we work with him on the field, and you're right, it's been limited, but we have opportunities here and there to work with them even after school now that the dead period is come and gone. But his hand his handwork and his footwork, and he's got a variety of different moves that he can use coming off the line of scrimmage. And then he employs the power, but then he'll use a finesse move here and there. He's just really versatile, especially as an interior lineman. And I want to stress for his age. I mean, a lot of times you don't see guys develop that kind of technique until they're a little bit later. But he's got a lot of areas of growth. I mean, he's got that big frame, and he's going to always battle that. So he's got to continuously work hard at staying in shape and in game shape, so that he can stay out on the field for long stretches of time. But I think that Oregon's got. I know he's a 3-star, and I do understand that matters to people. I don't know what exactly that means. I was a no-star player, so I think he's a better player than that. And I agree with you. I think that he's a kid that's going to surprise a lot of people, and I think he's definitely got the potential to get on the field sooner than later when he gets there. But he's got a lot of room to grow, and we've got some time here to continue to develop him. But we're excited about where he's at and where he's going to be.
High ceilings. That's what we love to hear as far as the future of a player in the middle of the defensive line. Let's talk about Tony. Now, he was at Willamette last year, so you did have a chance to coach him in his first year. He's a top 100 prospect, certainly for a reason, a combination of power and agility certainly to get by in a good combination of moves. So he spent 1 year in your program. And now, what are you kind of looking forward to for him, and what can fans kind of expect in terms of the development within the second year of Wolverine football?
I think he's faster. Tony's one of the best athletes I've ever seen. I mean, his athleticism is off the charts. I think he's, could potentially be one of the better defensive linemen in the country. Yeah. If he continues to work hard, which he has. I really like what I've seen from him. I like what I saw from him last year, and I really am excited about his development and growth in this offseason. He's really focusing on the weight room. He is a athletic young man, but I wouldn't say that he came to us really powerful in the weight room. But boy, he's really worked hard in the weight room at developing that, and it's coming little by little. He's just gotten a lot stronger, and I think having the opportunity to really compete in the weight room with Ami. Since Ami moved here, I think has benefited not just Tony, but I think they both benefit from pushing each other in the weight room. And then we've got some other kids on our roster right now that are pushing these guys. But Tony, definitely the thing that jumps out to you is his speed and his athleticism. He can get from 0 to 60 as fast as anybody can. And I look for him to continue. I think he had 80 tackles at the defensive line position last year, or maybe even more than that. I mean, that's a lot of tackles. That's very unusual. Unfortunately, I don't think Tony's going to have that many tackles this next season. He's going to have to share some of those plays with some other guys. But I think he's okay with that. But definitely has an incredibly high ceiling. Both guys do for sure have a high ceiling. They're just a little bit different type of athletes. Ami's kind of a bigger guy that could play a 3 technique. Tony's Tony's pretty versatile. He could play out on the edge, could play in the interior for sure, but definitely both really good dynamic players.
Yeah, certainly love the versatility of Tony and what he's kind of showed on his tape. Now, before we let you go, we got to talk about, maybe when you were putting on the helmet, when you were putting on the pads. I didn't prep you with this, but I got some video here from back in the day. This is from 2001 against Arizona. Look at that body control, twisting, the great throw from Joey, turning around against the Cats to put them into scoring territory, and then eventually, look at this, it's so great. We've got the card up there. It's 6'2", 243 pounds in 2001, and here's a touchdown earlier in that season against Utah State, showing off the wheels out there. So I had to make sure that I got that in for you. And how I want to set this up is just in your opinion, you've played in that program, as you said, under Coach Bellotti, and really that was the 99, 2000, 2001. That was really the time when Oregon was, especially that 2001 season, when the Ducks were really starting to kick it into gear. And now where this program is more than 20 years later, what's impressed you the most about what Oregon football and the monster and the behemoth that it's grown into from when you were suiting up to now as you look at it?
Well, I mean, I think, growing up here in the Willamette Valley, I'm a Springfield kid. Yep. And then, played a little bit of, I got to give a shout out to Coos Bay.
There we go.
Definitely. And Coach Waggle getting my life going in a really great direction. But the thing that I've noticed is how invested the community has always been in the program. And that as the program has continued to grow and get better, I think that just the support from the community and the excitement it brings to the community. I love I really like Dan Lanning right now. I love what he's doing with the program. I like how he includes the community in what's going on. I think he's done that. No offense to anybody else, but I think he kind of reminds me of Coach Bellotti when it comes to making the community feel like, we belong. Those who've supported the program back when maybe they weren't very good. And it just brings me a lot of pride as an alumni, with a nice little blend of local players and then the national attention that we've gained over the years. I just think it's really exciting for everybody. And I'm just like anybody else. I'd love to see a national championship. We've gotten close a couple of times, but I think it's great to have that as a goal and to keep striving for that, whether we fall short or not, it is not really the point, but that's at the forefront of our minds. And like I said, I really think Dan Lanning in this modern era where I don't know that being a college football coach could be any harder than it is now. I mean, it's got to be as hard as it ever has been, and for him to navigate that in the way that he does while still involving the community, I think it's just brilliant, and it's been fun to be a part of and to watch.
Well, we appreciate you here coming on that show out west today. We're excited about the development of both Ami and Tony. I'm sure I can speak for a lot of Duck fans. Corner of our eye, we might have our eye on some Friday nights over there for the Willamette Wolverines. Good luck to you and the squad this season.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Enjoy the show.
When you had the success that Oregon had last season, winning the Big Ten in their very first year in the conference, when you have the nationwide fan base that is the flock, there's a good reason why Oregon had 10 of their 12 regular season games played on network television last season, that being Fox, CBS, and NBC. And we're getting to the point in the offseason where these advertising upfronts are concluded, and now networks are announcing which games that they are going to carry, which college football games that they are going to carry throughout the season. So I'm like, let's bring it to TSOW. I am going to predict where every single one of Oregon's regular season games is going to end up from a television perspective, and thus a time slot perspective for a lot of these football games. Let's start first in week number 1. It's the second consecutive year that Oregon will welcome in a top 10 FCS team right off the bat. This being the defending FCS runner-up Montana State Bobcats. Now, when you think of FCS football, North Dakota State comes into mind. Now, South Dakota State comes into mind. The Montana Grizzlies in Missoula have had a lot of success over there. Shout out Washington Grizzly Stadium. Love that place. Love Missoula. But the Cats from Bozeman, I think, are starting to certainly work their way towards that conversation with the Dakota schools. Like, this is not going to be maybe a 40-point pushover in week number 1. This is a solid football team. This is a team that is certainly one of the best out there in the FCS. I think that this one is going to end up in the same type of slot that it did to begin last season. I think that this one is going to be on Big Ten Network. We could see Guy Haberman. We could see our guy Yogi Roth certainly on the call for this one. It's not very likely that when you look at the big 3 slots for the Big Ten, that a game featuring an FCS opponent would be thrown in there. Even an FCS opponent as good as Montana State. You've got Utah and UCLA. Texas, Ohio State has already been confirmed for Big Noon. Penn State has a lot of buzz. They're going to face off against the G5 team in Nevada. It would not surprise me to see this be the after dark time slot. And Washington played after Oregon last year in an after dark time slot on Big Ten Network. It would, since these two teams, of course, I think Bozeman is in the Mountain Time Zone, of course, but since both of these teams are out west, that would not be the most surprising thing in the world. But I'm personally hoping it's prime time here in Central Time around 4 o'clock Pacific Time over there. But I feel pretty comfortable in saying that week 1 is going to be on the Big Ten Network when the Ducks face the Bobcats. I have this as the only Big Ten Network game for Oregon this season. Let's move forward to week number 2. This is a very interesting matchup because this is a Big Ten on Big 12 game, and you have a Big 12 team in Oklahoma State coming into town. Like, when you look at the new Big 12, and I think when we were starting to look at, hey, who are going to be maybe some of the perennial teams that are going to be towards the top of that league. I think you thought of Utah. Kansas State has been really consistent at the top of that conference, and there are some others out there. But Oklahoma State, Mike Gundy's Cowboys, the Pokes, I think were a team that a lot of people were looking for that say, hey, they could perennially be in that conversation to head to Jerry World every single year. But you look at last year, this was a 3-9 football team, and they put up the old goose egg, winless in Big 12 games last season. But all of that being considered, Mike Gundy is still a recognizable guy. Oklahoma State is still a recognizable program and a recognizable brand. And when you look at the other games this week, the other Big 10 games, a lot of them are on ESPN properties. Michigan at Oklahoma, Illinois at Duke. Even something like UCLA at UNLV is on the road. I think Iowa State has a really good chance to be the Big Noon game that particular week. But if it's not Big Noon, that could also be an ESPN game because the Big 12 shares rights with both media companies. Like, all of that being considered, I've got Big 10 Saturday night, a primetime kickoff for the Ducks and the Cowboys. Certainly think that thing can be sold, even though the Orange and Black from Stillwater are maybe not the program they once were, but I've got this prime time atmosphere at Autzen Stadium there in week number 2. First road game of the year, week number 3, when Oregon heads to the banks of Lake Michigan, just yards away from the water, when they got to play in that soccer stadium at Northwestern. Now, I work in the television industry here in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. I have friends that work for Big Ten Network, so I've got some connections there. And here's what I will say about this small stadium and how networks kind of approach it. There is not a lot of room to bring a lot more infrastructure that the 3 big broadcast partners in the Big Ten want to be able to bring on. Like, this is a temporary stadium. These do not have permanent camera wells and infrastructure and cabling and stuff like that a lot of these established stadiums has. Like Fox, CBS, NBC, those bigger broadcasts, I don't think they want to come to do a game at Northwestern. So you're going to see a little bit of a smaller scale. Like BTN, I thought was a possibility here. Like, the biggest network that Northwestern played on last year was FS1. Like, they played Ohio State. I think that was in Wrigley Field still, but they played Ohio State on Big Ten Network last year. I think all because of that, I think this is going to be a smaller scale broadcast. I got this one on Peacock. I got this one being the lone Peacock exclusive stream over here. It's the Big Ten debut, it's the Big Ten opener for the Ducks going on the road to the Wildcats over there. So I think this could be certainly very interesting, but this has kind of a Big Ten Network or Peacock vibe to it. There should be no night games at this Northwestern Stadium. The sun glistens off the lake at Lake Michigan. It is a beautiful scene over there. So my hope is that this is like something like a mid-afternoon. I'm hoping to be at this game this fall. Let's head over and talk about week number 4, the rivalry game, Oregon and Oregon State in the Civil War. I've got this one in the 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific time slot on CBS, and I'm going to tell you why. When you look at that week, it has already been confirmed. Washington will play at Washington State in prime time on CBS. And I think that there's certainly other slots where this game could be, but I think that they're going to look to stack rivalry game on top of rivalry game over there on CBS. I think that would be really cool for those 4 Pacific Northwest schools to be able to have it on the same network. I think that's very, rivalries. It's interesting that some of these rivalries are starting to go away in college football. There's been rumors about USC and Notre Dame possibly not extending past this upcoming season. Oregon State is one of those that don't really have an extended contract for the future. We're hoping, I think, that this rivalry does continue in this non-conference capacity, but I think having the Civil War and the Apple Cup back-to-back is something I think CBS would certainly want to package together. All right, here's the big one. Week number 5, and this one maybe has a little bit of whispers in the wind attached to it. Oregon and Penn State. I've got this one as a whiteout in Happy Valley on Big Ten Saturday night. And maybe this is a little bit of a speaking it into existence a little bit, but we've already seen Texas and Ohio State has been picked by Fox. Ohio State and Michigan already has been picked by Fox. I think some of these other top picks by CBS and NBC, this is going to be their top one. Now, NBC, of course, got that Ohio State-Oregon game, which was really the top game to be picked last season. If it is CBS this year, I'm curious how hard they go after the Ohio State-Penn State game, and then this one might fall into NBC. So I could see this Oregon and Penn State game being a CBS game if they have the number 1 pick, but this is going to be certainly one of the top picks out there as well. But man, what an atmosphere that would be. That would be a really difficult atmosphere for this young talent with only 4 games under their belt going into a whiteout against an experienced Penn State football team. But I think like Oregon fans moving to the Big Ten, I think a lot of things they've said is like, hey, we want to really experience these unique atmospheres in the Big Ten. There is no more unique atmosphere, certainly, than a whiteout in Happy Valley. Ducks have a bye in week number 6, so let's advance to week number 7. Both Oregon and Indiana are going to be coming off of a bye here. And, when I look, there's some other games. Like, this is a pretty good weekend of Big Ten football. You've got Iowa and Wisconsin. That's a rivalry game. Michigan at USC. That was a really good game in Ann Arbor last year. Ohio State going on the road to an Illinois team that's getting a lot of expectations out there. But I think like what you have with Indiana, I think at worst Indiana is going to be 3-2. They're going to be coming off of games against Illinois and Iowa. I think there's a chance that they split them. I think that there's a chance that this is a ranked versus ranked matchup. And like if you want offense, you want some points on the board, you want good quarterback play, you want explosive wide receivers, big plays down the field. Like these are 2 offenses that can certainly provide that. Of course, you have the story that was Indiana. This is kind of their first game against one of the powers of the Big Ten since last year. Of course, Ohio State and Notre Dame and their losses a season ago. But that was the big thing with Indiana. They didn't play a lot of these teams. Going into Autzen Stadium, both teams kind of coming off of significant battles. Certainly, I think there's a lot to be said here. And I've got this one ended up in the 12:30 Pacific time slot over on CBS. Let's move forward to week number 8. Now, this is where Oregon goes on the road all the way across the country to Rutgers. The Ducks played in 3 Friday night games last year. I don't think they're going to play in as many Friday night games this season, but here's what I will say about Rutgers. Like, you've got some pretty good games that week to be able to choose from for your Saturday Fox, CBS, and NBC, like Penn State at Iowa, Washington at Michigan, USC, Notre Dame is already confirmed for the primetime slot over there. So I think putting this game on a Friday night fits in with the tradition that Rutgers is trying to establish. The last few years, they've had a blackout atmosphere. It is like it is an underrated one-game type of atmosphere. At least that's the way it appears in television. I've never been there in the Big Ten Conference and maybe in all of college football. It gets pretty rocking in there. But a Friday night across the country in Piscataway under the lights, that's where I've got this one, in that Fox Friday night time slot. A lot of people are pegging this game as like a Wisconsin, like we're the 16-13 rock fight type of game. I don't see it. I still think Oregon can win this game, even though it might be a little bit tougher with the atmosphere and all that on a Friday night and a short week. I think Oregon is still much more talented than Rutgers. I think there's another game later on in the season on the schedule that could be a little bit more rock fighty than this one. But I've got this as the only Friday night game, and maybe I'm speaking this into existence because as it stands right now, I'm scheduled to go. I know. I'm scheduled to go to a wedding on this Saturday. So having the game on Friday certainly might help me out a little bit more. Let's move over to week number 9 when the Wisconsin Badgers, the Ted LaRue Bowl here, the Wisconsin Badgers come into Autzen to face Oregon. Of course, Oregon went on the road late in November to Camp Randall last year. I think at this point in time, I think Wisconsin is in the bottom quarter of the Big Ten talent-wise. I think they're going to start to fade. I think at best they're sitting with a 4-3 record at this point in the season if they beat Iowa. Personally, I think they're probably going to be sitting somewhere at 3-4. And there's some other games on the slate this week that could be a little bit juicy. Illinois and Washington, rivalry games, Michigan State, Minnesota and Iowa. What if Nico and UCLA are lighting it up? They go on the road to Indiana. I think there's some other games certainly in there. Oregon did not play on FS1 last season. I think that this is your typical mid-afternoon secondary FS1 type of game. I think networks are going to look at this game in the week-by-week picks and say, well, Wisconsin, this is not going to be a close game, especially at Autzen Stadium. This is not going to be ultra competitive, and I think there's a lot of other games during that given week that could be competitive. Even though Oregon will probably be the highest ranked team out of those teams available, I think that this one slides to the FS1 slot over there. Let's get into the month of November. This is a sneakily difficult month of November for the Oregon Ducks, and it starts off with what could be a rockin' atmosphere in Iowa City. Now, I think a lot of people are looking at the whiteout, say, hey, if I'm an Oregon fan, I live on the West Coast, I'm looking to go to a Big Ten venue, I'm looking to fly out to the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, to take in that whiteout. If this Iowa game is where at the time slot I predict it to be, which is Big Ten Saturday night, don't sleep on Kinnick Stadium, one of the most underrated stadiums in all of college football. NBC loves going to Iowa. In 2023, they went there once, but they went there 4 times for a night game last season. I think they recognize what type of atmosphere this can really do and how it can really pop on television, certainly. This is a highly anticipated November game. Indiana and Penn State is likely big noon. I think this was maybe one that could be a candidate for the big noon slot for Oregon, a 9 a.m. Pacific time kickoff, but I've got this one on Big Ten Saturday night. This is kind of that tough rock fight type of game. That's the way Iowa plays. They punt the ball, they play field position. This could be one where it's got 20-13 written all over it. They turn around and play a good Minnesota team at Autzen Stadium. I think when people are looking at teams that maybe could surprise in this conference, people are looking over the Golden Gophers of Minnesota. If they can kind of figure out this quarterback thing, this could be a really, really good team. I think that this could be a ranked versus ranked matchup a little bit later on during the season. There's not a ton of other potential marquee matchups on the schedule. So I've got this one in that 12:30 p.m. Pacific time slot over there on CBS. Now, Minnesota had a home game late in the season against Penn State, also on CBS, where they pushed the Nittany Lions all the way to the brink, but that one was in Minneapolis. I've got back-to-back CBS games as we look forward to the most anticipated game of the season at Autzen Stadium, that is USC. So I've got USC also 12:30 p.m. Pacific time on CBS. I think that this is a sneakily really good, high-level maybe TV draft pick for the networks. Of course, LA is a big-time market. Oregon has that big-time fan base. USC is a team where if they can really put things together under Lincoln Riley this season, hey, maybe they lose to Illinois, maybe they Illinois or Michigan, they lose to Notre Dame in the middle of the year, and maybe they take care of business in some of these other games. This could be a game with playoff implications. I think there's no doubt that this is going to be a CBS game or an NBC game, but I kind of put it in the mid-afternoon. This is also one little bit of a tease here that I might be headed to as well. Finishing off the season, of course, with the Washington Huskies, this one on the road in Seattle. I've got it in the same time slot as last season on Big Ten Saturday night. A lot of good night type of atmospheres on the road at Washington, on the road at Iowa, on the road at Penn State. There's going to be some difficult environments to play in, certainly, for the Ducks this season. Now, Washington is a team where I can think they could win 7 or 8 type of games. I mean, they've got good players on offense, but they don't have the complete team that I think Oregon has right now. We know Michigan and Ohio State is going to be the big noon game. USC and UCLA could very well be the CBS game. Remember, USC and Notre Dame was the CBS game this past year. So I think they end up on NBC in the final game of the season there in Husky Stadium. Last time they were in the Husky Stadium didn't exactly work out so well, so they're hoping to get revenge. I've got 4 games on CBS, 4 games on NBC, a game on Fox, a game on FS1, a game on Big Ten Network, and a game on Peacock. The only Big Ten property that Oregon would not be playing in is Big Noon Kickoff and Big Noon Saturday. So lots of diversity in my 2025 Oregon TV predictions. You know, I've got a lot of opinions on Oregon Ducks football. That's one of the reasons, obviously, why this show exists in the first place. But there are a set of talking points. There are a set of opinions where I'm at the top of that hill. I am planting my flag, and I am willing to die on that hill on a group of opinions and a group of topics as it pertains to the perspectives of Duck football in 2025. Now, some of these might not be the most controversial topics, but I am extremely bullish. I am extremely confident in these groups of topics. All right, let's dive right into these hills that I am willing to die on right now. First one, there are bigger things out there. There are bigger fish to fry, as we say here in the Midwest, than a Big Ten championship for the Ducks. 2024, great season. Beating teams like Ohio State and Michigan during the regular season, and then you beat Penn State in the Big Ten championship game. That was phenomenal. A phenomenal accomplishment in year one participating in the Big Ten Conference. But what did it show us in the end? It showed us that was just one piece to the puzzle. Like, this is not the old days when you needed to win the Big Ten, when you needed to win the Pac-12 to get to the Rose Bowl and to have a national championship opportunity, that you needed to win all your games, that you needed to win a conference title to get a national championship opportunity. That's not what this is about anymore. The conference title is just one piece to the puzzle. What did last year also show us? It's about playing your best at the right time of the season. And that right time is the month of December. Sometimes it's all about momentum. In the NFL, they've been having this for years, where a team gets hot at the end of the regular season, they go into the playoffs, and they start to make a run. Sometimes it's not about the team that has the first round bye. Sometimes it's not about the team that has a week off, or in this case, many weeks off between the first week of December and then, of course, New Year's Day for these college football playoff quarterfinals. I think that the hill that I'm willing to die on is, hey, the Big Ten championship last year, that was great. We don't need a repeat. It's great if the repeat helps. And if that helps Oregon get that much closer to a potential national championship, because I think now the picture is clear. With the talent that Dan has brought in and the coaching and everything surrounding Oregon football right now, they've accomplished everything except win a national championship. So whatever helps you get to that point, you need to be able to do. If it's playing a lot of young players early in the season, having them learn those lessons, if it means taking a 2-possession loss to Penn State, if it means maybe losing a second loss sometime in the season. Ohio State last year was a perfect example. That loss to Michigan got them riled up. It got them ready to go. And then we know the run, obviously, that they went on at the end of the season. Not every situation, not every national champion is going to be like that, where, hey, you lose in a rivalry week and you get fired up and you go on this run. But the point that I'm trying to make is I think the most important thing is turning the 0 into a 1, I think, right now for Oregon football. If this is a team that has to go through their bumps on the road early in the season, if they got to lose a game, if they got to lose 2 games, to figure it out so that they're playing their best football in December, then, man, that's what needs to happen. It's more important winning in December than it is winning in October, than it certainly is winning in September. So whatever you got to do to get to that point, that's what you got to do. Hill to die on, number 1. Let's go to number 2, defensive side of the football. This Ducks defensive line will be one of the best in college football. I am extremely bullish on this topic. I am extremely confident. There's so much youth and inexperience around this Oregon roster in a lot of different places, and that's been one of the big talking points when you look at the broad topics surrounding Duck football. But there is actually a good amount of experience returning up front of the defensive line. You look at Mateo Uiagalelei. He had 10.5 sacks last year, led the Big Ten, and he played a little bit certainly the year before. Tatum Tuioti kind of in the same boat. Like both Mateo and Tatum, they combined for 16 sacks and 21 tackles for loss last year. I think that's one of the best edge rushing, pass rushing combinations out there in all of college football, personally. And then you look to the interior. And, the two guys that are at least projected to start have a decent amount of experience. Bear Alexander, I know a lot has been said about him, but he's played a good amount of football before. You look at USC, not this past year, but back in 2023, he has some really good tape to show off. You look at Amari Washington. He played in all 14 games last season, and he was after Caldwell and after Harmon. He was that next guy in the rotation to provide depth on that defensive line. All across these 4 guys, there's experience. You don't have an extremely green and you don't have an extremely young guy that has next to zero experience. All these guys have been there. Now, different amounts of time and maybe in different places, but there's experience here, and I think there's good experience up front, and then you go to the depth. Like at the edge position, we talk about a little bit of experience. Blake Purchase has a little bit of that playing in that 2023 season. Of course, this was a redshirt year this past year in 2024, but I think my favorite performance from the spring game was Blake. He was in there on every single freaking play. So you have him, you have Ashton Porter, you have Elijah Rushing, like coming off the edge. Like there is so much depth, so you can keep your great players fresh. You can keep Mateo fresh, you can keep Tatum fresh, Amari fresh, Bear fresh. You go to the interior of the defensive line, and I think another thing that makes me so bullish and another thing that makes me so confident about this group up front is they have elite size. These, like you look at Tion Gray and Terrence Green, like these guys are what, 6'4", 6'5", 320, 330 pounds. Like Jericho Johnson takes it to another level if he's able to get into the rotation this season. Like they've got elite measurables. They've got a lot of depth. Their front group has at the very least, all together, put together a decent amount of experience. I think that this is going to be the group that is going to set the tone for the defense. I think that this is the group you're going to really see this defense and this pass rush and this front really unleash this season. I think you're going to see the best example of an Oregon defensive front that we've seen in the Dan Lanning and Tosh Lapoy era. Let's go to offense. There's a lot of weapons. Dante Moore, we know, is looking to sling the football around a little bit. We know about DeCorian Moore. Talk about him here in just a little bit. Evan Stewart and his track speed. How about the backfield? How about Mekhi Hughes? How about Noah Whittington coming back? And Dink Riggs. Like, there's so many weapons, but to me, there's one that stands out above the rest as the best weapon, and it's Kenyon Sadiq, because you can line him up anywhere on the football field. You can line him up out wide. You can line him up in the slot. You can line him up at the tight end position. Hell, you can even line him up in the backfield. We've seen that happen a couple of times, and he can get involved in some run concepts. Like, you line him up anywhere on the field, and you can create, whether by his talent or schematically, you can create an extremely favorable matchup. Small corners against him, he can use his size to be able to separate and post up. You got a slower linebacker or a safety against him, he can use his athleticism to burn by up the seam or wherever it is on a given concept and a given play. I look at a lot of these other guys on this offense, and I think they're really, really good weapons, but I'm most excited, I think, about what Kenyon Sadiq can truly be. On threes, J.D. Pickell called him the Big Ten's Brock Bowers. I think that he's going to have a similar impact on this offense where you are going to be able to look to him consistently to be able to make plays, keep on moving the sticks, and get big chunk plays certainly going down the field. Every time I think about Kenyon Sadiq, I just get so excited about what this all could be. Let's move on to wide receiver. DeCorian Moore will be wide receiver 1 by the middle of the season. Now, I think it's a little bit, who knows, it could happen, but it's kind of a little bit crazy to think that Dak could be like wide receiver 1 right away. Not saying it can happen, because I think you need to build up some of those reps. You need to build up some of that chemistry a little bit in game situations to be able to get there. I think right out of the bat, Evan Stewart is certainly going to be your guy that, he's the returner. He's the experienced guy. He's the talented guy. He's been in this system for a year, that I think he's going to be the guy that we're going to look to. But I think as this season really goes along, we're going to see DeCorian Moore get a lot more comfortable against college defensive backs, against college coverages, and he's going to kind of work out those kinks, as many as there are. There might be a little, there might be a lot, we don't know. He's going to work out those kinks that he needs to, because I think when you look at talent and the package that a lot of these receivers bring, there's a reason that DeCorian Moore has been compared to Jamar Chase. Like, he's a freaking talented dude. I see the speed of Evan Stewart, but I think when you really can uncork this thing and possibly who can be the most talented player when you get to, for example, the Washington game in week 12, I think that could be DeCorian Moore. I think once you get to Penn State game, once you get to Indiana game, I think you're going to really know what you got. And I think as that kind of starts to evolve, you're going to see DeCorian Moore really be that top X or Z receiver on the outside. And I know this is a little bit contrary to what I had in my projected depth chart, but hey, it's May. Things can certainly change on the fly here. We got a long way to go. But I think Evan Stewart is going to get a lot more comfortable working from that Tez Johnson position. Like, he's a really fast type of guy. You get him open in space, and I think that, like they did with Tez, and again, that's where you're going to get the best version of Evan Stewart. I think you put DeCorian Moore on the outside with his great explosiveness and his route running ability in one-on-one situations. That's where DeCorian is really going to come in, and that's where DeCorian is certainly going to play his best. So I think by the time he gets a little bit experience, he's going to really evolve as that top pass catcher on the outside for the Ducks. Last one, I've said this many times before, Naeem offered Trey McNutt. It is going to be very difficult to keep them off the field. In my projected depth chart, I had these guys as second-team guys. I don't think these guys are third-team guys. And look, people, I understand there's a lot of players that can contribute in the secondary, but I know the spring game is just one example out of the 15 examples that this coaching staff got this spring, but I saw the plays that they made against experienced receivers in the spring game. Naeem offered making a play, Trey McNutt getting in there and making the play. I think these are 3-year guys. I don't think that these are guys that are going to be here for a 4th year. That's how talented that I think they are. I don't think either of these guys are going to really work into a starting role. Look, I'm not saying it's completely out of the equation. I think these guys are supremely talented. But to be honest with you, I think that these guys are going to have a role. They're going to be in the rotation. They're going to be in certain situations. They're going to be in certain packages. You're going to see them have an impact at certain times during this season for Oregon, especially I think once we get a little bit later in the season, you're really going to start to see the talent that these guys have. But, I think that these guys are really in line for 2026 and 2027 to be those impact starting guys to be able to work their way up to maybe be first-round draft picks when all is said and done. Good luck keeping them off the field. Another great edition of TSOW is in the books. I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to thank everybody for listening. So until next time, I'm Ted LeBrew. This has been That Show Out West.